Hello, my name is Kimberly Smith. I am a retired Baltimore City police officer. I'm currently a federal background investigator with the U.S. government, and I'm here to conduct this interview or to participate in this interview with Mr. Dante Peterson.
Good evening. My name is Ernest Fleming, street name Sam. I am an ex-drug user, drug supplier, and I'm here to answer some questions on the topic of drugs.
Okay. So let me ready? Go. How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Rainbow Israel. Also, you can call me Minister Rainbow Israel. I'm Associate Minister, Faith United Baptist Church. I got 26 years drug-free. Used to be a crackhead, dope fiend, blackout drinker, drug dealer, ex-con, you name it. So, fire away.
So the first question would be, how have you observed or experienced the war on drugs in your line of work?
In my line of work, I've experienced the war on drugs simply by being in the community and dealing with those that were very active into the drug activity. The war on drugs has been a major issue in Baltimore City as well as other states, but I've interacted with those that were high level as well as low level in my line of work.
I'm not sure what you mean when you say war on drugs, but as far as experiencing drugs, yes, I have. The war on drugs is a term that I believe is just used by government because I don't really believe there is a war on drugs. Drugs are too plentiful to come by to tell me that there's a war on drugs. How can our country be doing what they say they're doing to stop drugs from entering to the country when you have so many drugs in the country?
Definitely, I experienced it, man, because it, took a toll on me back in the day. Like I said, about 26 years ago, I started off casual as they all do with some marijuana. Then next thing you know, it advanced to cocaine. We experimenting, just sniffing it. And all it did was just numb my nose, and that wasn't really cool. So back in the day, that's first started out, it was cool. You get a little sniff, put it on your gums, and freeze it, whatever. And then it advanced. So definitely experienced a war within my own right.
What violence occurs due to drugs?
Some of the violence that occurs due to drugs is simply the high rate of shootings that we have. And not just shootings, some of the drug-related activity results in human trafficking as well as rapes, because once young girls are introduced to drugs, they are forced to do things that they shouldn't do, and they're in a situation where they have to compromise. So that leads them to, of course, a lot of sexual activity that they're not looking for. So that violence of drugs, that just the violence part of drugs itself leads to a lot of different things.
Well, you have all kind of violence occurs. Some of them due to drug use, and others due to drug selling. You have murder committed by drug dealers, one worrying about their areas being taken over. You have murders and being committed by drug users or drug dealers because they sell drugs and then they get used to using drugs, and then they can't no longer sell drugs, so they go around and they take drugs from other dealers, and sometimes other dealers might call themselves fighting against them, so they already come prepared with their mindset on they're going to get the drugs that they're coming for one way or the other, be it murder or just you giving them to them.
You see it violent. You see it on the news and everything, man. Sometimes a person may not have enough money to get the drugs, so they'll go start robbing and stealing to get it, depending on what they did, heroin or crack cocaine. I always thought that crack cocaine was the deadliest because it was a mental thing, whereas heroin, that's a physical thing, for people who don't have the heroin fix, man. They become what they call ill, their bodies ache and everything. But with the crack, man, it's like no physical condition other than you lose weight, but it definitely takes over your mind, and you have to do whatever you have to do by any means to get that drug, whether it's rob, kill, steal, whatever. So definitely.
Do you think the war?
Things.
So some people believe that the U.S. government doesn't have a high priority in controlling drugs and the war on drugs. Do you think that the war on drugs should be a high priority in the U.S. government?
Yes, I do feel as though the war on drugs should be a high priority, and more emphasis should be put on inner city communities, as well as different programs that should be set up for inner city youth, and as well as just young adults, period, who are doing things such as trying to get to college. So things should be put in place even prior to someone getting to college from the government.
Again, I don't believe that will ever happen, because in the years that I had being included in the drug game, we call it, there has been a lot of times when you get a chance to step back and you listen to older people talk to you. Drugs didn't just start being sold today or yesterday or last year. I was reading up on it, and it was as far as back as the 1800s, drugs was in this country. What kind of war do we call ourselves having if drugs are still plentiful? You can go around here in this city of Baltimore, and practically every corner that you go to, there's a drug crew. So if that's called war, I would like to know who's in charge of this war.
Priority to the U.S. government?
Well, no, not really, because they're the ones that are allowing the drugs to come in, man. I mean, you've seen plenty of the movies. We don't own no poppy fields and what have you, and we all know where it's coming from. So, that's an understatement. They want that to be in America.
Knowledge from the government, yes.
Where else could the money be invested? Where else could the money be invested in the war on drugs?
In regards to the war on drugs, yes, just as I just stated, some of the money should be invested in educating people about drugs, drug activity, the results of drugs, and ways to prevent people from getting involved in drugs and or gangs.
Again, we're going on my individual thinking when you say the government is supplying so much money to help stop the war game or whatever. That's hard to believe. Again, I believe that the money that they're taking from the drug dealers could be used in a better way. Then we never hear about what this money is going to. These officers and police they're taking so much money in the process of a year through raids and things like that. We never hear about where that money is going at as far as the city is concerned. There has to be a place or somebody held accountable. And as long as there's nobody put out front to tell you what money is being used and where it's being used at, it's hard to believe that it's being used for anything that's helping the drug user, the drug, especially the kids that gets involved in this, because we got a lot of kids that are coming from the parents that are using drugs. And some of these kids are coming out as addicts themselves, So if we're going to talk about where can we spend money at, let's start spending money and helping these kids that's been caught up in this system.
Okay. How do you think the war on drugs is affecting our community?
All you do is step outside and look at it, and you can see it. It's twofold. You have the young guys that's coming up now who's seeing the drug dealers prior to them with the flash and the cars and the clothes and the jewels, so they wants to sell it to their own people in the community who's using it. So you have, on one side, you have the brothers that's making money off of it, then you have the users who are dying from it, and it's all happening in the black community. So it's doing nothing but demoralizing and destroying the community.
Terribly. The war on drugs has caused poverty in certain neighborhoods. It has caused dysfunctional families. it has just caused an outrageous amount and number of murders. So the war on drugs it's terrible right now, and it's outrageous, specifically in Baltimore City.
In our community.
It's time. It hasn't just started again. It's tearing the community down. It's always tore the community down. You can never have a community being built up when you have so many drug dealers, because drug dealers are not concerned about building up a community because they already know that they're part of tearing that community down. Years ago, you had people who wasn't afraid to come outside and clean their fronts off, clean their steps off every day, all day. They kept the community clean. They used to have a community cleanup organization here in this city. You don't hear about that anymore. So you go through the neighborhoods now and you have the elderlies who are half scared to come out their houses to do anything other than going shopping and going straight back in the house, because you never know when gunfire is going to erupt in the community. So drugs tear down communities, they tear down families due to the fact you have a lot of drug dealers, young drug dealers nowadays, whose parents are on drugs. So if you're on drugs and you need drugs and your kid is selling drugs to you, how can you be in charge of your family? So it's tearing down the families, it's tearing down the communities as well.
The legalization of drugs would benefit the U.S.
Oh, well, I mean, it's funny. You think about that. They're only going to legalize right now marijuana, and it's going to benefit most of the white race because they are going to be the ones who own the dispensaries. Like in Colorado, you have a lot of them owning their own dispensaries because it's legal in Colorado, and they're becoming billionaires, millionaires. I mean, housing places to grow this marijuana. So it's only going to benefit those who have the money to be able to get it and control it and to sell it. It's not going to benefit the low man on the totem pole, so to speak.
Would there
Our government legalizing marijuana, it's not a good thing, because you're causing people to, once they get hooked on marijuana, they want something stronger and they go to other drugs. So legalizing it is not.
drugs would benefit the U.S.?
I don't think it will benefit the U.S. As far as I understand, this one legalization they're talking about is the marijuana. When I was coming up, they always told you about how much marijuana could damage your brain. But now all of a sudden they got studies that's telling you something, that marijuana is not as bad as they thought that it would be. And that can't be all true, because you're sitting back and you're looking at the evidence from the marijuana smoker. They're just as bad as the drug users. The dope users, the heroin users, if you don't have your drug and you don't have your money to get your drug, you're going to go out and do what you have to do to get that drug, be it take it from somebody physically or whatever. So when you say legalizing, how can you legalize something as powerful as a mind-altering drug like either one of these, marijuana, pills, heroin, any one of them? It's mind-altering. So that means that you're going to start thinking totally different once you get these drugs in your system.
And last question, do you think the war on drugs is a means of implementing institutional racism from the U.S. government?
Exactly. Of course it is. Of course. Of course it is. That was a good question. Of course it is. Think about it. They were spending all this time, money, and effort and years by putting not just black people, but some of the white folks too, putting them in jail because of selling marijuana. Now what they do, they turn around and they legalize it. Now, who do you think they're going to allow to sell it? It's going to be hard for somebody without skin color to get a dispensary and start selling. It's going to be real hard, you know what I mean? Just like convicted felons can't possess firearms, so I definitely believe that it's going to be racism and it's going to be segregated within that right now, definitely.
Okay. Thank you for your cooperation, and thank you for coming in for the interview. We appreciate your thoughts.
Oh, I appreciate it, man.
It has a lot to do with institutional racism. I think it does play a part. For the most part, I think everyone has a choice. So depending on, or no matter what color you are, I'm not gonna say depending on, but no matter what color you are, you have a choice. So if you choose to get involved in that type of activity, that's certainly your choice. But it does play a part in institutionalized racism, because once you get to that that level of having to be charged with the crime, it is tougher for people of a different race.
Okay. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you helping us in our investigation, and we appreciate your opinion.
Thank you for asking. You're welcome.
Well, I believe that they make sure that they keep a lot of it in the African American community, and for that will never, the war on drugs will never work, because we have higher power people who are trying to make sure that a group of people stay in a set mind frame that they would prefer, and that is, as long as they can keep drugs running through the African American community, it's always going to be an African American that use them. No, this is not the only community that use drugs, but if you look around, the minority community is where the majority of your drugs are being found at. So I think that the government has a lot to do with that.
Thank you for your cooperation and your time. We appreciate your opinions on this matter.
Thank you, gentlemen.